So one of the things that we've really focused on is how do you engage some of the institutions that have the most decision-making power over capital flows to be better actors, right? And part of what we mean when we say better actors is twofold. It comes back to this question of, as charitable organizations, why do we have investments at all? And the reason we have investments at all is that we want to be able to continue to execute our charitable purpose in the long term. And so the climate fight isn't done. The social justice fight isn't done. So how do you make sure that you will be able to continue to take that fight to the places it needs to be taken to? And so that's why you have investments. But historically, folks have thought about their investment portfolios, which are usually 95% of all of the assets they have available to them, as this thing that's just off to the side, then funds their charitable work, which is just 5% of what they're spending every year. Well, if that's the case, then 95% of what you're doing is oftentimes going directly against your charitable purpose. And so a big piece of this is, how do we bridge that gap? How do we bring it back home to 100% of what we're doing should be focused on your charitable purpose? And for us, that's a healthy planet for everyone. And so when we engage institutions, part of what we're thinking through is, what are the things that this institution is doing? What are the actions they are taking or not taking that is, A, endangering our ability to execute our charitable purpose by putting our assets under needless risk because of climate risk, et cetera? Or then B, what are the things that they are funding that are directly opposed to our charitable values? And so when we're thinking that way, we have to say, well, okay, if we make an analysis of what that looks like, oftentimes a lot of these organizations are putting our assets at risk, not only because they're not protecting themselves, which is oftentimes too small of a way to think, but rather they're endangering global systems, which creates risks for all portfolios and every other asset in our portfolios. And that's that whole idea of systemic risk, right? You can't mitigate against something that is that places entire economies, entire ecosystems, entire systems at risk. And so instead of thinking too much about, how is an organization going to protect themselves against something that they are contributing to globally, we now want to start thinking about, how are they going to mitigate the damage that's being caused by some of those actions? And so there's a couple of ways to do that, but the specific example I want to give is our engagement over the past year and a half with a number of institutions on the topic of environmental justice. And when we talk about environmental justice, what that means for us very specifically is factors related to how we are transitioning, who reaps the benefits of that, who reaps the harms, the current state of affairs, who reaps the benefit, who reaps the harms, and finally, perhaps most importantly, environmental health, right? What is the effect of pollution of our air, our water, et cetera, on communities? And how are different institutions taking into account those risks and those harms, and also those benefits? And so behind the scenes engagement focused on two different tools available to a lot of these institutions. One is policy, and two is practice. And we talk about practice, it's usually through due diligence practice. And what we were able to do was, through this, supporting the work of some of these institutions who oftentimes had not considered the topic of environmental justice, or who oftentimes struggle to understand how you can account for the materiality of that in their day-to-day business. And they said, hey, well, we don't know how to do this. Can you support us in developing these frameworks? And we did. And as a result of that, we got about $7 trillion worth of policy changes and diligence practice changes across institutions that we engage with. And that just goes to show, again, it's not splashy. It's not necessarily going to be something that you can issue a press release about, but it is some of the types of engagement that asset owners, like endowments, college endowments, like foundations and family offices, have access to by way of having the right to those assets. And so I think, to put a fine bow on it, the thing to remember is that, what is the purpose? Why do you have those investments? And never forget that at the end of the day, those assets belong to you.